Hello there and welcome to today's video. I was hoping to bring you footage of me removing and replacing the strut top mount on my K11 Micra, but due to difficulties in removing the top nut, which I won't go into in this video, I have decided instead to post a video of me removing the strut and also just cleaning up the general strut mounting area, cleaning up the strut itself and the spring, and doing a bit of extra rust proofing / getting rid of rust in the area of the top mount. So, as they say, when you can't do the job that you were intending to do, if you are given a motorhome, make meth, as I think they say in Albuquerque. They don't, but you know, maybe they do. Who knows? Anyway, the first thing that we had to do was obviously jack up the car, and the second thing that we had to do is to get the road wheel off. So here I am removing the wheel and placing the wheel underneath the car itself. Now the tools that you'll need for removing the strut is a breaker bar, because those bolts which attach to the hub carrier are on very tight, or they certainly will be. Liberal amounts of penetrating fluid, a rubber mallet to allow you to drift out things, and a suitable drift to allow you to drift the bolts out between the hub carrier. The hub bolts themselves, the bolts on the strut to the hub carrier are 17mm in size, so you'll need a suitable 17mm spanner, suitable 17mm socket. Go for a full hex socket, not a double hex thing, so you don't end up stripping the bolt itself. And make sure that you use a breaker bar to get those off, because they really are on there tight. What I was able to do here using the spanner was to wedge it against the brake disc whilst I was wrenching off the bolt itself, and that really sort of allowed me to get the bolt off, but go slowly because you will hear a lot of sort of creaking and cracking noises as you're doing it, and the last thing you want is to shear the bolt itself. To be honest, the bolt is pretty stout and sturdy, so it's unlikely that will happen, but if you do sort of feel any sort of cracking or resistance, ease off a bit, put a bit more penetrating fluid on there, and just sort of gently go for it. Don't really sort of go at it full weight, as it is quite a delicate sort of area after all these years. The top bolts for the top mount are actually held on by a pair of 12mm nuts, and these can be undone just using a standard 12mm socket. Now the top mount itself is actually held on with a 14mm nut and a sort of top spindle bit with two cutouts on it, which I think I worked out you can actually put a 6mm spanner onto, but I wasn't actually able to get enough purchase to be able to get those off. What some people do is they use a pair of adjustable mole grips and they clamp the actual damper shaft, putting a rag over it and obviously clamping that, and they can get it off that way, but a lot of people have had to actually sort of get them off by putting them in vices, standing on things and other stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is probably go for the easier if more expensive route and actually build up a new pair of struts for the front, and probably at the same time also replace the rear springs and shocks. I mean, the car's 18 years old, so they're probably sort of in need of removal. What I did notice, however, was I noticed a bit of rust developing around those two holes that the bolts, the top mount mounts through. So what I did was to clean up the area with a bit of sandpaper, and I noticed that some of the rust had started to sort of creep under the paint, and you could actually sort of see that it was spreading under the paint in areas that you couldn't see. So to be honest, I think I've got it caught in time, as probably what would have happened over the next few years is you would have seen a bit of bubbling in that area, and what would eventually happen is you would get more and more bubbling, and then eventually you would get a hole in that top mount, which you don't really want. It's not the best thing to have. It's a structural area. It can be repaired, but it's quite tricky, and there would be a lot of deck clearing involved to repair it. So what I did was I used some standard primer just to sort of prime the area, a standard generic metallic silver top coat to match the rest of the car, and then a standard sort of lacquer just to go over the top. Now, the interesting thing about Nissan is they have not actually sprayed metallic paint in the engine bay. It's sort of this sort of strange matte finish. So the main bodywork of the car is Starburst Silver, KL0 is the paint code if you're interested. But the the engine bay and certainly the boot area are this sort of bizarre matte finish. And I've seen this on quite a lot of Nissans, certainly the Almera and other Nissans seem to have this, but I think some other manufacturers use it as well. It's just a way of cutting costs. So you do sort of end up with a superior finish if you're doing it yourself anyway. What I did with the spring and the strut itself was just use a bit of satin black on this, very sort of casually, to be honest with you, rub down the spring itself, because I'm going to be replacing it soon anyway. But rubbed down the spring, sprayed it with a bit of satin black, and once that was done, actually went into remounting the strut itself. Now, unlike a lot of vehicles, the bottom bolts are not cammed in any way, so you don't have, say for example, eccentric bolt holes, which would mean you could actually sort of adjust the toe-in, toe-out camber, etc., or rather the camber actually, using the hub itself and the position of those bolts. So replacement and removal is pretty simple. You don't need to sort of mark up anything in paint or anything like that. It's literally off it comes, on it goes again. There's no need to sort of mark anything up. Incidentally, this is also the case on the N16 Almera. The front hub doesn't have any sort of eccentric mounting points, so the bolts literally just fit through the holes. There's no eccentricity to sort of contend with, which is good. It does make removing the mount itself, the strut itself, a lot easier. What I actually did was I sanded down that the hub carrier a little bit, and actually just sprayed a bit of extra satin black on there just to sort of spruce it up a bit, and also to stop any rust getting in there. I did go over this top mount again, as you can see here, because I'd forgot to sort of clean one particular area, and there was a bit of reaction between some of the rust proofing denitrile I'd had on that inner wing and the paint and primer that I put over the top, so I just rubbed the area down again and just resprayed it to give a nice finish. What I did in this particular area here was just sort of went over the brake ferrules again with a bit of satin black and just gave everything a general bit of a spruce up. Now, mounting is really easy to do. You make sure that you got your top mount in the right position so that it can sort of meet up into the holes at the top of the strut tower. What I did was I applied the two 12mm bolts at the top fully, so that the strut was located and not able to move. And then these bottom bolts, literally, so with a bit of wriggling of the hub carrier and a bit of wriggling of the bolt itself, I was able to get the bolt to go through quite nicely out to the other side. So obviously remember that the bolt head is to the rear of the car, so that'll be pointing to the rear of the car, and the nut is pointing to the front of the car. Now once I got all of these tightened up, and I used in this case I used the inner wing with the spanner wrapped in a rag to prevent any damage to the inner wing, to sort of basically brace against and allow me to tighten up fully. And for the bottom one I used the brake ferrule connector bracket to allow me to brace the bottom bolt against to get those on there. The brake ferrule itself is actually held in by this spring clip, and you make sure that the ferrule is mounted. There's a little cutout notch in the actual pipe itself, and you can just drift that in with a suitable rubber mallet or something suitable. What I did with both of these areas after getting sort of everything reassembled was a liberal application of some of the satin black paint, mainly as sort of like an attempt to sort of seal the area so that sort of moisture won't really have any sort of inclination to get in there, but also just to sort of make it look a bit more presentable after reassembling it. What I also did to the bolts before putting them back into the hub carrier was to give those bolts a bit of a light sanding to get rid of any rust that sort of may be present in the threads. So what I'm hoping to do at some point is to actually completely replace the struts and the springs, but that'll be for another upcoming video. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and also consider subscribing for more upcoming fascinating hobbies. Thank you for watching.